Okay, so welcome to the Creating the Design and Animation of Filmation's He-Man. Clap. To my left, I've got a bunch of talent that would overwhelm any animation studio from right to left, I guess. Got Charles Zembillas, who was a layout artist for a bit, but then primarily character designer. This man here, with the epic beard. Rob Lamb, one of the many Robs at the studio, who is a storyboard artist and writer, but for now we're going to talk about his storyboards. The lovable Tom Sito. Look, it sounds like a Stan Lee comic. Tom Sito, another storyboard artist and later director on She-Ra. Don Manuel, I've met once or twice, but always wanted to hang out with because the man is like super talented and has worked on storyboarded so many shows over the years. But He-Man, She-Ra, and probably everything you grew up with. So that's that man right down there. And last but not least, Michael Swanigan, who is probably Filmation's biggest fan, who worked at Filmation, I'd like to think, and storyboarded a hell of a lot. There you go. Okay, so I'm doing like a PDF thing, like whilst I talk to the guys as well, so showing examples of their work. I thought I'd start off just by showing like the script-to-screen process so everybody knows where this whole production goes along. So you'd start off with the script, talking about He-Man. He strains to, push this, whatever that is, magic cone. Then that goes to storyboard, which is drawn there by, I think that's Sito. That's Tom Sito's storyboard.
Yeah, I think it is.
That's his storyboard there. Then that would go to layout. So once upon a time, like Charles Zembillas would have done layout on this. I think that's Sharon Rolnick's work. And then you go to the line art, and then what you see, the next thing is the cell, which I don't have. But yeah, that's the process, so you can understand where this whole system falls into place. Okay, so I'll start off just by asking each one of you at a time how you ended up being employed by Filmation. I'll start with you, Charles.
Okay.
How did you end up at Filmation?
It's a really interesting story, very unusual. I was an artist at Hallmark Cards in Kansas City. And at one point, I was doing some research into animation, and I read a book called The Illusion of Life, which was a really groundbreaking book about the process of Disney animation. It was done by two of the great animators there. And they said in the book that they were looking for animators at Disney, but they were having a hard time finding people who could, like draw and animate in the Disney style. So I said, I can draw and animate in the Disney style. So I sent my portfolio to Disney, and I made it. I made it into a training program. And right when I got here, the very first week that I arrived here in California, got here right at the beginning of this massive strike in the industry. And I was driving around this little Honda Civic. I had no place to go. I had no place to live. I had my portfolio with me, some clothes, some art supplies, a pot to boil water in for hot dogs, and I was camping out, living at the beach. I was basically homeless for quite a while. And but one thing led to another, and I eventually, after I went to San Diego, lived in San Diego for a little bit, found a little bit of work. And then I found out that the strike was over, so I came back up to LA, and I managed to find a floor to sleep on. And I started calling around all these studios, and I was saying, I'd like to get into the industry. I'm out here from Kansas City, used to work from Hallmark Cards and stuff, and I was calling all over town, and nobody would even take the time to look, except Filmation. And the very next day, I had an appointment to see them. I met with one person who took to another, and I finally wound up in Lou Scheimer's office. And he was looking over my work, and he said, I think this was a Friday, and he said, are you familiar with what we do? I said, yes, absolutely. I said, I watch Star Trek and Black Star and all your cartoons all the time. He says, okay, we'll start you off apprentice layout Monday. So that morning I had a job, and then that afternoon I got an apartment. And just like that, I was working in the industry, and I happened to be there a little bit just before. It was a very interesting time in Filmation because it was very transitional because the strike was very devastating to the industry as a whole. And Lou Scheimer, I remember, was really upset that he only got like 7 second season shows of a show called Gilligan's Planet. And there was really nothing going on like 80% of the people in the studio were gone. There was really like a vacant studio. And I was there the day that they brought in the box of toys from Mattel and said, this is the next cartoon we're going to do. And it was all the action figures and the vehicles and stuff. And that's how, you know, it all started. That's, you know, my story of how I got into Filmation and how I was fortunate enough to be right there at the very beginning of the He-Man series. So.
All right. Thank you, Charles. Well, like Charles, my dream was to work for Disney, and I came out in the mid-'70s. Didn't quite make the grade. Struggled trying to find work. I ran into a Filmation artist by the name of Bob Klein. I was working at an art supply store, Aaron Brothers at the time, and he was framing some of his animation art. And I got real excited, real interested, and asked him about it. And he said, well, actually, we could use some storyboard artists. We've sold a bunch of shows. It was 1981. CBS has bought many shows, and this was before the strike. And we need some more storyboard artists. And he gave me the name of the supervisor, Carl Gears. And I went home, threw together a quick portfolio, and did some quick storyboard sketches. And I went in and showed it to, I got an appointment with Carl, and I showed him my stuff. And he said, well, I can see that you know film. And he gave me a test. He gave me one line of a Lone Ranger script. I said, one line? He said, yeah, just draw as many possible camera angles to illustrate this line. And he gave me a couple of sheets of storyboard paper, and I went home. And it was just Lone Ranger was giving a farmer bad news, and the line was, the farmer's shoulders slump in resignation. So, okay. So I drew him sitting on the front porch. I drew him close-up of wringing hands, as many as I could think of. And I'd filled one sheet of 9 panels in about 15 minutes, and I went, there's no way I can get a job this way. So I took another sheet, and I did another 9 panels. And I called Carl up, and he said, I said, I got the test done, can I come in? He said, no, you were just in here, come in tomorrow, don't bother me. I said, okay. So I came in the next day, and I handed him my 2 sheets of paper, and he looked at them, he said, you're hired. I said, you're kidding. I said, no. He said, the most anyone's ever given me is 4 panels. You gave me 18. And then the producer, Don Christensen, came in a Hawaiian shirt and Bermuda shorts. And he said, this is the guy I was telling you about. And I go, he was talking about me to the producer? Ooh. And he goes, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, the guy knows film. He can't draw worth crap. Yeah, I died right then. I was about 25 years old. My dream, I see dreams going out there. And he goes, well, it's up to you, Carl. I'll hire him if you want to. And the saddest left. And Carl said, well, you put me in a pickle here because you're not quite up to our standards, but we really need guys who can tell stories. So I'm going to put you on 2 weeks probation. And come in Monday, and we'll get started. So I came in, and I apprenticed under Don Manuel, and worked. My first 2 boards were of New Adventures of Zorro. And I realized very quickly that I was the worst artist in the storyboard staff. I had many great artists to look up to and emulate. And I will say this, drawing 40 hours a week for 5 months, you do get better after a while. And so by the end of the season, I was at least a little bit up in the ranks, not great, but at least tolerable. And but at the end of the 2 weeks, I was really nervous. So I went into Carl's office and said, well, do I come back in on Monday? And he looked at me like I had 2 hands. What are you talking about? I said, well, the probation, the 2 weeks probation. He goes, oh, if you're going to get fired, I would have told you long ago. Okay, good. And so that's how I got in there. And that was the year that Black Star was being produced, which was He-Man's grandfather. And but that was my way in.
That was your way in. Mr. Sito?
All right, so I started in animation in the mid-'70s, and I had the opportunity early on to work with Richard Williams, the Academy Award-winning director of Who Framed Roger Rabbit and all. And Dick was based in London, but he did a lot of work in Los Angeles as well. And I worked in New York and Canada, and I came out in '82 to work with him on a TV special called Ziggy's Gift, which got an Emmy Award, but didn't really go much past that. And that era of '82, '83, we had the big strike, which is to try to keep work in the country. And, that was like very devastating to the industry. And then there was a recession on top of it. So at the beginning of, like spring of 1983, there was really not a lot of stuff happening in town. There was a lot of unemployment. Disney's was laying off from the Black Cauldron, and there was really Filmation and this other, and Don Bluth, I think, was doing Space Ace and Dragon's Lair. And I think that was it. There was really like not a lot of stuff going on. So I was kind of fortunate that I knew this guy, Bob Arkwright, who was the head of the Storyboard department. And Bob and I had worked for, I don't know if you remember Jim Simon from One Two Animation. Jim started the first all-black animation studio, and he hired me. So it's like, that's right. And then Arkwright is like his family's from the Mayflower or something like that. He's like whiter than, I don't know, skim milk or something. I don't know, but I guess Jim thought like, oh hell, I just need artists, but I got to know Bob from there, and then I went and took an animation test on this, to do storyboards. And I remember like I was sitting next to Don like the first week, and I looked at him and I said, come on, the name of the show isn't really He-Man, right? That's like a temp. It's going to be like Ragnar or Karnak or something, Torok, son of stone. He goes, no, it's He-Man. I'm like, okay. But then, it's interesting that of all the shows, stuff I've worked on in the 80s, He-Man's just got this staying power. I just got back from Australia, and I was giving a talk at the University of Sydney. And when I'm showing my reel and He-Man comes on, the audience goes, yeah, it's like, wow. So it just has that longevity that people remember. So.
Basically, back in the 70s, I was your typical struggling artist. I was working on my own books, a few fanzine books here and there, but I didn't have much direction. I didn't even know what a portfolio was. But I took a couple of trips down to Hanna-Barbera, showed them what I had. They said, it looks good, but keep on trying. Come see us again. So I went back to one of my many odd jobs, which was, and the last one I did before coming to Filmation, I was grooming dogs. So baiting them, and you don't want to be around a sick Doberman Pinscher before you had your lunch break. Yeah. Anyway, but it was times like that made me realize I have to do something with what I love to do, which is obviously draw. I grew up on Marvel comics and cartoons and all that kind of stuff. Well, basically, once a friend of mine, a name you probably might remember, be familiar with, his name's Larry Houston. He got a chance to join Filmation through our mutual friend, Will Minio. And after about 3 months, Larry was on board. He told me they were still looking for artists. I still didn't have a real concept of a true portfolio, but I brought in my roughs of the comic book of my own I was working on, came in, had an appointment with Will and Carl Gears, showed them my work, and they said, okay, can you do storyboards? And luckily, Larry had given me a storyboard to just look at. The storyboard was a show called Sport Billy. Now, not too many people are going to remember this because it was for the German audience, syndication somewhere. So, and it was simple, big-headed kid and his sister and his dog. They ran around the world with a magic bag, kind of like Felix the Cat. But to me, it looked like an easy concept, so I said, oh, this is a storyboard. This is the truck end, all this little mechanics. So as long as you can draw the characters, I figure, okay, I'm ready to go try. So once I showed them my own interpretation of a storyboard, they said, okay, we'll give you 2 weeks, see how you do. And so they gave me a trial on Sport Billy. And after that, before I can get comfortable, after about 3 episodes of Sport Billy, then they say, okay, Don, we need your help on Tarzan. We need revisions on Tarzan. They were still working on Tarzan for CBS. And after that, then it was Flash Gordon. They just had a successful run of the Flash Gordon movie. It became a series on NBC. So they said, Don, we need you to work on Flash Gordon. And after that, then they shoved me over to Lone Ranger. And then, of course, a couple other things. We worked it on Black Star, and then the almighty He-Man shows up. And that was, and I said to myself, you know, He-Man, this beats the hell out of grooming dogs anytime. And so that was pretty much it.
Swanigan?
Okay, mine's a little bit more nefarious. I was between jobs back in the early 80s, but I was a big comic book collector. I loved going and get comic books, and at that point, comic books were coming out like twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. I went to my local comic book store, and there was a stack of flyers near the cash register. It was from Filmation, and it says, if you can draw these characters, and it was Captain Marvel, Lone Ranger, and I think Fat Albert, we're looking for you. I went, great, I can finally get my chance at Filmation. So after I paid for my comics, I took the whole stack of flyers with me. I figure I would cut down competition. So that way I wouldn't have to worry about competing about anybody else. So I went to the studio and met Carl Gears and had my sketchbook of all the characters I'd done, Superman, Batman, Scooby-Doo and such. And he says, okay, you can draw. He says, well, here's a test. And the test was on the Lone Ranger. Unlike Rob, I was given a whole script to do, a whole page of script. And I had never done a storyboard before. And he says, well, are you any good? And I said, damn right. And he says, well, you should be able to do this then. And I said, okay. So I got the script and I went home. And he gave me the model pack and everything. And I went home and I put it on my table. And I looked at it. And I looked at it. And I looked at it some more. I figure maybe it'll draw itself. Because I have no idea how to do a board.
Right.
And I got a phone call from a cousin of mine. It was Friday night, and he wanted to go partying. And I go, I got this test. I really want to get this job at Filmation. I really want to work on this show. And he says, well, what's the test? I said, well, it's on the Lone Ranger. And he said, the one that's coming on Saturday morning now? And I said, well, yeah. He says, well, I recorded those shows on my VCR. For some of you who don't know what VCRs are, tape recorders. And I said, really? And he goes, what's the episode about? And I said, well, there's this train they think is a dragon. He said, oh, I recorded that one. And I went, record it, got it, stop, freeze frame, I'll be right over. So I grabbed my artwork, my papers, and I went over to his house, and we put it on, and he would run it and freeze it, and I'd draw what I saw. And then it would freeze again, and I'd draw some more, and I go, okay, I think I've got the whole sequence. So Monday morning, I showed up back over at Filmation. Carl was busy, so I had to talk to Mike Jens and Will Mineo. And they pulled me into the office, and they said, well, let's see what you got. And I showed them the board, and they got together, and they were, and I'm going like, oh, God, I'm caught. And they go, come over, and they go, this is pretty good. This is almost what we would have done. And I go, great. And they said, okay, we're going to hire you. And I said, all right. And they said, well, we can only pay you. And at that time, it was like, I think, $850 a week. And I was getting like $250 a week before. And they said, well, this is all we can pay you right now, but, we'll improve. And I go, oh, yeah, I can deal with that. And they go, okay, well, you start Monday. And I go, great. Came back on Monday, and they gave me my first script on Black Star. And again, put it on my desk, had no idea what to do. But luckily, they put me in a room with Mr. Manuel here, who came in 3 hours late to work. And I went to Don and I said, I've got this drawing here and I have no idea, I'm brain dead. I just can't, I brain freeze. I don't know what to do with this shot. And Don said, oh, here, I do, and Don drew all these drawings for me. And I go, that's exactly what I was going to do. And I took his stuff and I put it on my board. And I went to the next board artist and down the hallway, and I kept doing that until I got my first board done. And I turned it in, they go, this is pretty good. And I went, I'm learning. So after asking a lot of questions, I learned exactly what was due and how to do it. And learning from people like Don, you know, I got better. So that's how I became a board artist at Filmation.
Okay, so a more question that applies to this convention. Do you remember the first time you saw a completed episode of He-Man? Like when, you know, you're in the studio, they're like, here we go, here's the first episode of He-Man. You're like, oh, okay, so the first time you hear Skeletor's voice or all this stuff, like, any memories?
We had Lou threw a premiere party for all of us. And this was a really big deal. I mean, we was all used to just seeing the usual footage that would come in through the dailies or whatever. But once, I guess, Lou and the staff, they fed us. I like free food. Can't remember about the alcohol, but once the film started and we see, okay, Filmation, and then all of a sudden they had the stereo up loud, this booming, da-da-da-da, boom, boom, and I was saying, what? This actually feels like I'm watching a real movie, and I felt the excitement, the energy just gelled in different ways from everybody that was in the screening room. And personally for me, even though I worked it on a lot of shows, this was actually the first Filmation show, for whatever reason, I felt really excited about.
Oh, wow.
And even though, yes, we're familiar with the stock system and all that, but it was just entertaining. It was colorful. It had a lot of things going on, and we were familiar with the board artists. I think Bob Klein, and he did the first one, right? And just watching this was, to me, was an amazing experience.
Oh, wow. Any other memories, guys? Next question. Okay, so I was just going to go through some storyboard examples. This may jar a few memories, and then we'll get on to Charles and his millions of character designs. So this is like an example of Rob Lamb's storyboards. There's He-Man chopping the screen with the overhead chop, chopping through Chakotay's face. There's like Rob's sexy lady drawings of Chakotay. What else we got? Oh, that's like an example where you take a bit of the script and then, you know, you're doing a panning shot, but you really put all the text in there as well. Who else? Oh, that was one of your bigger panels to reduce down, was it?
Yeah, sometimes I would do a larger panel because it was hard to get all the detail into a smaller panel, so I'd do a large panel and shrink it on the
Xerox machine. Next, we've got Sito. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, does everybody understand when you see on the panel it says OL or UL or whatever, that's a painted element that's over the animation. So it's like if this was an animated scene right now, you have the backgrounds, this is BG, I'm moving, so I'm an animated level. This is an OL. So it's a thing that doesn't move, but it's in front of me.
Like overlay.
So, yeah, overlay. Yeah, like that. So.
Okay, this is examples of Tom Sito's work, who has a more cartoony style at times. So you can see Skeletor there pleading.
At times.
I was always trying to put humor in it.
This was the one with the famous clawful one, which never made it into the episode, where he's listening to Skeletor and he's like utterly bored of him, so he just starts doing that, which never made it into the episode, unfortunately.
That's like Tom trying to figure out the script he's working on.
He was bored, yeah. Lou Scheimer would go like, Yeah, very funny, Sito. Buckle laugh.
And yeah, no, more cartoony kind of. Yeah, you seem to like drawing Orko a lot because you can do a lot with him.
You do kind of funny stuff.
And there's like an example of there was this like one sequence that Tom like illustrated, and then I think you actually did
I animated it
he animated
too,
it as
yeah.
well. So yeah, I forgot to say Tom animated the death of Evil Seed. If you remember that amazing scene where he falls apart, that was all Tom as well. And there's like another example of like just extreme animation poses.
Yeah.
Don Manuel, who's like this amazing comic book style. Like there's He-Man lifting Castle Grayskull. What else we got? There's He-Man and Teela and a lovely moment.
I always loved Don's panels.
Yeah, I
Don
remember-
got so much information in one panel and stuff, and it's so clear and everything. I'm very jealous of you.
When I first started talking to Rob was like, "Have you ever seen Don's work?" I was like, "No." So here's some examples. I was like, "Ooh." So yeah, Don's style again, very energetic kind of thing, and a very confident pose of He-Man there. Yeah, more action stuff, and also like notes. If you look at the bottom right, it says note to layout. No smile on She-Ra. This woman is all business. So there's such a great. As an example of like He-Man again showing feats of strength, and then that scene from The Price of Freedom where she thinks He-Man is dead, so she like leans against the rock, and obviously it wasn't always guaranteed to translate to screen, but thankfully it did in this occasion. Swanigan, who does amazing like bold line art, so you got these He-Man ducking a blast there. Just a really lovely thick style. On occasion, I think on some boards you guys could shade and stuff. I don't know if you're allowed to, or just you wanted to make it look pretty.
I was trying to show off.
Could I say one thing right quickly
No.
on that scene?
No.
On that previous scene, that two-shot with He-Man and the slave guy. What was his name? That's
I
Tale
don't.
from Two Cities.
So-
Swanigan was that scene right there. That character, Swanigan was the first artist that actually provided a black character in this series. And I'm always been proud of him on that. And, every once in a while we try
shucks.
to...
Oh, shucks.
Every once in a while we try to generate as much diversity as we could that would be fitted the series, try to make it a
I
little
was going to say, in your
versatile.
storyboards for House of Chakotay Part 1, you actually have your design of Malaktha, and you say he should be a black man kind of thing, so you were kind of really kind of pushing that.
Yeah, one time when I worked on a show called a She-Ra episode, Huntura, and it was split between me and Vicki Jensen. Huntura was hired by Horde Prime to start a fight with She-Ra to get rid of her, right? She was supposed to be the ultimate warrior, and we thought it would be cool if Huntura could look like Grace Jones. So, but they didn't. So I did a rough model design. I forgot who cleaned it up, but it came out pretty nice. It goes to the layout department. They kind of tweaked it a little bit. The thing is, I think they were concerned about lawsuits or whatever. They made this Grace Jones Hunter character purple.
Yeah.
Yeah, purple warrior. Okay, fine, but she still had the mohawk, and she still looked at badass and all that kind of stuff. And but one thing I liked about us giving the opportunity to work on this series, we had a chance to design characters off and on. Because sometimes we would wind up getting model sheets from the from upstairs and say, I'll look at Swan, say, Swan, this sucks, don't it? And you would say, yeah. Okay, so sometimes we would wind up, Chakotay, I made sure, I did a rough design of her, I made sure she was hot. Horny but hot, and Swanigan, he designed that character and the crazy chick queen and her little henchman. And the funny thing, Lou did the voice of those two black characters, and they sounded like they were German spies. And I thought that was great.
Yeah, Lou called me downstairs after the animation came back, and he goes, "Did you design these characters?" And I went, "Well, yeah." I went to the model department. They were too busy. They said, "You can do it," and I went, "Great." He says, "You made them black," and I went, "Yeah." Is that a problem? He goes, "Well, we did the voices already. We recorded the voices," and I go, "Okay." we did German voices.
And Lou played the guy.
Yeah, Blue played the guy, and Erica played the girl, but they were all German accents. And I go, okay. He goes, well, this will be interesting.
The only thing we didn't have in that was missing was a moose and squirrel.
I always wanted to know who designed wolf bats. So remember wolf bats? It was like these wolf heads with little bat wings.
I think that came from upstairs.
That was like one of the bizarrest things I'd ever seen.
So yeah, I'll just continue showing more storyboards. This is Swanigan's work. That's one of his cringer poses, like cringe falling on his face. I think that's from a She-Ra script. This was just about not following the style. So obviously some board artists, like your Barry Caldwell's, went a bit crazy. So like, there's an example of Rob Lamb. He's staying very much on model there, and like keeping it in the Filmation style. But then you get like a Barry Caldwell, and it's like there's a lot going on there, and that's the references there are to stock, but that looks like nothing we ever saw. But
Barry really hated working on He-Man.
Everything I was going to ask.
He hated superhero stuff. Barry was a comedy guy.
Yeah.
He did the best comedy boards, and he was transferred over to our show against his will. So when he got boards, he would funny him up.
He went Barry on us.
Yeah.
And he did that on Lone Ranger
on
also.
Lone Ranger too, yeah.
And he would change the symbol on
He-Man's
chest.
a question
It'd be
mark.
a question mark, an exclamation
There's like
point.
the Superman.
Yin-yang.
Superman, yeah.
Everyone was different.
I saw like a one where it had like a Shazam again.
Yeah.
It was like, it's
Shazam,
crazy.
yeah.
So that was Caldwell's work. And there's like a Tom Sito. If you look at the bottom right Skeletor, it's just the cutest drawing of Skeletor ever.
Sito was on the show, but Sito didn't care.
No, he didn't care.
More Sito examples there. And then they're kind of, I misspelled storyboard there, but we won't acknowledge that. This was just talking about what the guys just talked about, how like Dragoon here, this is illustrated by Steve Hickner.
I think.
Yeah.
And then Charles Zembillas was given the job of like turning it into a character, and oh boy, did he do that, because this is the Dragoon who's such a badass character, just like this crazy muscly dragon creature. But then the funny thing is, obviously these characters were designed whilst you guys were boarding, so you'd get storyboards where on one panel you get Dragoon like that, and on another it's like a revision, so it's like, well, we better draw him on model now. But it's kind of weird how that was going on as the storyboard was taking place. Mm-hmm. But now, like, here we go to Charles Zembillas' character designs, of which I've tried to feature as many as possible. So we got Lizard Man, who was like literally one of the first new characters to appear in the show, and that was Charles. And what I like about Charles' style is once you see it, you kind of recognize his style of character design. Do you want to talk about your, character designs and stuff, just in general?
I really didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't know what I was doing.
That's why you got the job.
Have you detected
I was very, I was. This was like really very early for me, and I was struggled, because I have my own approach to things, and I was being influenced profoundly by my office mate at the time, who was Bruce Timm, who went on to do some really great things in animation, Batman and all that stuff. And also I was seeing the work of Bob Klein, which was really remarkable. And I was trying to adapt, and I wasn't really used to, that the style that was being set. And so I was really tried my best. I did a bunch of other designs for this character, which I thought were, were more dynamic and more suitable for some reason. I can't remember. This is what they went with. And I think this was actually like the first original character outside of the He-Man pantheon, let's say, that, like Filmation designed. It was for an episode called She-Demon of Phantos, I think, which there was two shows that went into production. The first one simultaneously, She-Demon of Phantos was one. And I think I'm not 100%, but I think the other one was called Cosmic Comet. The Cosmic Comet. Or something like that. But so it was like right at the beginning. It was like really, really right at the beginning. And, just didn't know what I was doing. I did my best. And I had a knack for this. I just had a knack for taking. What I did was, there was a lady there called Carol Lundberg. And there was another artist there by the name of Herb Hazelton. And Carol, when the toys came in, Carol got the good guys. I think it was Carol. Herb got the bad guys, and I got the vehicles. So that's the first thing I did. So whenever you see like He-Man jumping on the sky sled and he's taking off, or you see like the Wind Raider coming in, you know, kind of one way and then flying in out of the scene the other, that's what I did. I did the models for those, and I did those initial scenes, the initial for stock footage. And then I went into layout for She-Demon of Phantos, and then for some reason I started getting into character design. And that was the only show I ever did layout for, and everything else happened to be character design. So that time that I was at Filmation, 3 different times, and each time I was there, I was doing character design.
Wasn't there? And there was a thing too about there was characters that were specifically created during the show, but then there was like designs that would come from Mattel.
Right.
Things like, you know, hose nose and
Right.
things like that, and like we would get these designs and we're like, what the hell are those guys thinking?
I know. And it was tough, man.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it was like, because we're all like creative individuals. We like, you know, we like to create original material. And I was listening to this fine gentleman who was here on the last panel, and he was, you know, the creator of He-Man, and he was telling me about how unhappy he was with what he was seeing from Filmation and stuff like that. Or it's some aspect. I was saying, well, you should have been on our end, you know? I mean, you know, like, well, here we are, and we want to bust out, we want to do these great things, and we're all like really confined by the toys that we're getting from Mattel. So like Mattel was like setting the design pace, so to speak, for the series. And every time we had an opportunity to do something to break out of that formula, we tried to do, you know, we did the best we could with it without straying too far from, you know, stylistically for what had already been established. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
I'll just go through a few more designs. It says
And I
Dragoon.
really, that Dragoon character.
Was Azrog yours?
That looks like either Harry Sabin.
Ah, right. My apologies.
That looks a lot like Harry Sabin, but I'm not 100%.
That was based on Barry Caldwell's
Yeah, that was
story.
the electric.
Yeah, the
that was
Energy
like
Beast.
The Energy Beast, and that was terrible.
Batros, who's like a big fan favorite, and
Batros.
yeah, such cool character. Isa.
Yeah.
The funny thing about Isa that nobody really knows because of the action figure that came out is he's actually like a foot taller than He-Man. That's his actual size, but it didn't really translate in the episode. But I always found that fascinating that Charles created this character as a monster compared to He-Man kind of thing. His original name was
guys,
like Iceman.
I have to. I got a lot better over the years. I mean, I would not put that in my portfolio today. But
For some
I'm happy
reason,
that
this is
you
still
did.
one of my favorites.
Yeah,
That's a great one. That's funny.
You know,
This giant robot guy.
Ultron, right?
That was off my rough.
That was yeah.
The Enchantress.
Was that like? I wanted to ask about this character. Was there any kind of connection to the Sorceress in terms of design? Because she had also had the Falcon headpiece thing going on, or the owl headpiece.
I don't know. I think that there may have been. You know, I can't remember exactly if I was given direction on it. Another thing too, I had nothing to do with the color. The color, I had no input on the color whatsoever. It just right.
Yeah, Irv Kaplan was like a big guy at UPA in the 60s and all. And
green.
yeah, he had very unusual ideas about color. So it's this like, pea, green skies and purple mountains and things like that. That was all Irv. So
Just crazy stuff.
funny stuff.
You know,
So yeah, a few more of Charles's work.
Lurker.
The Lurker.
I like that. I was very proud of the Lurker.
And obviously
That's my
Luffy.
favorite.
Lucky.
That's my favorite. That's a favorite character that I ever did for Filmation. Was Lucky.
And Cap. I always loved I remember when I came to PowerCon, I think it was in 2011 maybe, and Charles turned up with this folder full of artwork that I think if you watch the Power of Grayskull documentary, you'll see.
I got it today.
Ah, he's got it today, and in there is
I brought if you want to see
go to his table.
artwork, development artwork from Filmation that has never been seen before. I've never publicly shown it. I brought a bunch of stuff today, and it'll be on my table. I just want to have, I'm going to have one showing sometime this afternoon, and that's going to be it. So.
Yeah. We used to make jokes about, because Arthur Nadell, who was the head of the writing department, was a big one for like Lookie and for these little characters and sticking them in and sometimes shows were already written and we have to go back in and we have to put Lookie in somewhere, and we always teased because Arthur directed one of Elvis Presley's last movies. I think he directed Clambake, something like that. And we always said that after that, Elvis was taking fistfuls of pharmaceuticals.
That's probably for Mattel. Mattel was asking him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true. Mattel. Yeah, because they wanted to put those things in.
We gotta sell stuff.
Yeah.
There's Imp, of course. Again, another one of my favourite characters. And Grislaw was, I think, your main Horde one, I guess. And now I was going to show you a few Easter eggs or like random references. So this is one of Sito's panels. If you look on the far right of this monster panel, there's Snoopy and a Smurf.
And Snoopy's in the lower.
And there's like, I think on the
right.
far left, there's like a giant, like kind of ant creature, which didn't make it in. That was Sito's The Greatest Show on Eternity, which is obviously the Crackers the Clown episode. So He-Man's like looking at the script and
That's right.
Sorry, Robbie.
That's right.
And there's-
Robbie and I are very proud that the fans considered Greatest Show on Eternity one of the worst shows ever done. So
it's a great legacy, man. And then here's a panel from Don Manuel, and there's a bunch of storyboard artists, Egidio del Ciel,
Bob Forward.
Rob Lamb at the back there, Don himself. And this was one of my favourite panels in like a She-Ra storyboard he did where, you know, usually in the storyboard you just photocopy for the transformation sequence. Like here's the usual dupe neg and you shove the transformation panels in. But midway through, he actually does this little illustration where it's the kids watching the show at home, which I thought was such a great thing because it's the storyboard artist acknowledging this is like the big scene in every episode. So there's all the kids and there's like a dog wagging its tail, Orko looking depressed, and the telly kind of exploding with the power. But I just always thought it was like a really cute little panel. Swanigan's boards, I just wanted to highlight because, as I said earlier, he's like such a Filmation fan. So he would do stuff like in his storyboards, like here's a storyboard from The Remedy. And if you look at the bottom, He-Man's like pulling back on a rope. He's about to swing. And first thing Swanigan does is reference Tarzan animation. So he wanted to include like Tarzan movements in the episode.
Well, we were told to use stock as much as possible. So my revenge was to use old stock.
And the animators loved you for
You
it.
know, we got yelled at. It's like, you're not using enough stock. And sometimes like, boards have to be 50% stock, 60% stock. And I went, okay, well. He didn't say what stock. So I go back and get stock from Tarzan, from Flash Gordon, from Aquaman. I'd go back and get Black Star, whatever I could get to pull out. I go, okay, I put stock on it.
I mean, this would be fire,
You know,
water,
Yeah, I would just pull something from old shows.
lightning, all that stuff.
I remember having to animate on one of those, and I think I was turning like Flash Gordon or something. No, it was Tarzan into He-Man or something in a swim cycle, and you'd get the old paper and it's yellow. You know, it's so old. You know, and it had these little things called peg reinforcements, which were these little stick-em kind of things you put on the peg holes so that they didn't tear, and it kept the registration. And those things were so old that when you flipped it, there was this snow of these little things falling off it and all. And it was like trying to work with that made you crazy.
Did they smell like cigars and cigarettes?
I think so. Yeah, that old. You know.
So this here's what like in The Remedy there's a character, a little short guy called Mitro. But in Swanigan's storyboards, it's like, oh, Mitro looks different there. And then you realise, hang on a second, Mitro looks like that little Trobbit from Black Star, which he was trying to reuse a character design there. And obviously the one he did get in was Warlock from Black Star, who became the Tactral that He-Man rides in the episode. Other things like this is where it kind of goes off from Filmation. So this was the design, I think the original design of Nepthu from Temple of the Sun. And so that's how we ended up in the episode. So Mike Swanigan was like, well, here's my version, like when he was doing the storyboard. But
well, I had gone to the model department. I said, I need a character for my board. I said, well, we're busy right now. Come back next week. I go, well, I got to have a character for this. And they go, well, we're busy. And I go, well, fine. I'll just take one from someplace else.
So in this case,
I'm a big fan of Jack Kirby's
so
work.
it was Ramatut from
Ramatut.
Marvel Comics. Was he like Kang the Conqueror, the Time Traveler as well, or something like that?
Right.
And then there's a few others that I noticed when I was putting together the He-Man book. You got Catalyst the Wizard here, who appears like that in the episode. But in the storyboards, it's like this guy, and I was like, I know him from somewhere. And it was, he was like Catalyst the Wizard. That's how he looked in the model design. And then it's like, wait a second, I think he's from Dragon's Lair, which was a Dragon's Lair 2. And there was another one. This was one of my favorites. I think I might have discovered this while working on the book. So there's the character Ariel from the She-Ra episode, The Anxious Apprentice. And in the storyboards, it's like, well, Ariel looks very different there. Sito knows what it's from. And I was like, she's from rock and roll. So it's just, I love the idea of just Swanigan just aping everything, I guess.
Yeah.
Just pulling it together. So let me have a look at any more questions and things. Oh, just one more thing. This is...
I was just going to add one other thing. Steve Hickner, who also worked in our team, and he later directed the B movie with what's his name, Seinfeld. He was doing shows, and he always made it an art to try to find obscure stock scenes to put in the show, and he tried to make it a goal. Like he had this one scene which was Triclops gets his stool shot out from under him while he's seated, and Steve tried to figure out a way to put that in every show. I don't know how he did it, but he managed to get in every show he did. It was like Triclops gets his stool destroyed. That's right.
This is a cute thing, I thought, like going through the storyboards and one of the character designs. So obviously She-Ra looks like She-Ra, as we all know and love. But in the storyboards, they didn't have the designs. This was like one of Sito's like designs for She-Ra, of like a kind of a crazy headpiece that one fan actually thought was a hairstyle. It's like, no, that's not a hair sticking out the sides. That's like a tiara. Then you've got Don Manuel's quite, famous She-Ra, which is a raven-haired, leather-clad beauty. But one of my favourites of all time is Charles Zembillas' She-Ra there, which was wearing almost like a helmet headpiece and the wing tiara. But that's guys. Yeah.
I completely forgot I did that. Until I saw it, somebody showed me the drawing of it a few years ago.
And that drawing makes me think of that track, Flight of the Valkyries.
Yeah, it's very much so.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
But I mean, any questions, people? Any Q&As or? Oh, we got Roby.
Roby.
So maybe this is off topic. So I see what you guys did and do. So now the animators come in. How can you touch on what they did after it gets to their department? Or is that too far away?
Well, from when I was directing, generally what you would do is that you would make your changes as a director, with the story department, on the visuals. And by the time it got to the animators, you would cast animators. So there was some, and we had a wide swath of different types of animators, from very young people who were doing their first jobs and were hot to do more, important stuff, to very old people in their final years. We had a guy named Jack Ozark who animated on Popeyes at the Fleischer Studio, and then we had Steve Clark had worked on was it Mr. Magoo in the '60s and all, and then you had younger artists too who later became big factors on The Simpsons and things. So you started to figure out, okay, well, the guys who wanted to do a lot of very physical full animation, you would give them the hard scenes, and then the guys who were the younger, and then the older guys and stuff, you give them the, mouths, talking and stuff like that. I remember there was this one old animator named Dick Hoffman, who had worked at Disney. He was a very elderly man, and he'd stand over me. He goes, "Come on, Tom, give me some good stuff." I was animating when you were in a spot in your old man's pants. Thank you. Okay, here's some mouth moves. Just like.
And I remember being responsible for certain scenes in which it looked really cool to draw on storyboard, but once you see the show, and I'm thinking, oh, this must have been really hell for the animator, and he probably hates my guts. 'Cause I did have a reputation of, really taking off some animators once in a while. Oh, it's a dominator scene. Oh, you do it,
we've got a question.
Yes. Hi. I have a question regarding, being that He-Man was more of a syndicated show versus the typical Saturday cartoon. I'm assuming or how fast was the turnaround for storyboard artists? I'm assuming for animators it was insane. But how about you guys? Or
we were 4 weeks an act.
Yeah, well, during the first season, each one of us had our own show. Most shows that's done today, they usually will assign like 6 guys on the show because they wanted to cram it out faster and faster and all this type of stuff. We had our own individual episodes. I think we had 6 weeks? Yeah, but it was easy at the time because we had stock, and once we got some of us who was there at Filmation for other shows earlier than He-Man, we already knew the concept of stock. I mean, they had the same numbering system of the head, close-up, stock 2, stock 1, the run cycle. And my favorite stock, of course, became stock number 22, which was Tila jumping in the foreground, not facing you. It was a little stiff, but it was always kind of fun to do it for some reason,
My favorite stock was stock 16, which was He-Man going. I think in Greatest Show in Eternity, I put it like 27 times. Every other shot.
Now it's a YouTube. Now it's looped on YouTube now.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got to wrap up now. So just thank you to Charles, Rob, Tom, Don, and Michael.
First of all, I want to personally thank everybody involved with the PowerCon for inviting me. I think it's a great honor to be here. A great honor to be here with my colleagues over here. This is a wonderful experience. Also, I have a bunch of stuff that I would like to show you. I'm going to be at booth 308. I'm not selling anything. I'm just going to be here just for a little while this afternoon. If you want to see development artwork from She-Ra, some very rare artwork from He-Man, I've also got development artwork from Brave Star, and something also very, very special, some very special stuff. If you want to, just let me set a time here. Can you give me a time? James, what time is it now?
What we got?
It's 12:30.
If you would like to set a time, just give me a time. I'll be here at booth 308. I'll be happy to give you this mini little art show.
308.
Huh?
308.
At 3:08 in the afternoon? Will that work out for everybody here?
Yeah.
308 at 308.
Okay, let's make it 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
At 3 o'clock this afternoon, I'll be at booth 308.
One thing I like
And
to
I'll
say.
wait 8 minutes for everybody else to get there, and then we'll have a little show.
One thing I like to say quickly is it was fun working with all these guys. To this day, even though it's been 30 years since we worked together, or 35. Yeah,
35.
Feel old. But I still consider all these guys like family. So working with these guys, it was fun. We had our laughs. We started our trouble with Lou and Joe Mazuka, but we had fun doing it, and we had fun working on this show. So
I'll say one other thing too. If it wasn't for Filmation, you would have never seen Disney emerge into the superpower that they became in the late 80s or early 90s, because when Filmation closed, as far as I know, I wasn't there at the time, they scooped everybody up, they doubled their animation staff, and that's what made it possible for them to do a feature animated film a year. It was the artists of Filmation. There was no studio in the country like it. We were the only studio at that time that was producing all of our content, all the animation, every aspect of production underneath one roof. We weren't shipping out to Korea or to Taiwan or some distant, remote location. It was all being done underneath, in one place, and that was because of Lou Scheimer. And Lou Scheimer, it was his desire to do that. And I want to also, reiterate that, because will probably never ever be another place like that. Filmation was really, really something special.